Well, welcome to this podcast in which I am delighted to be welcoming Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, as he's here at the Cathedral to discuss a little later on Why I Care and Why Care Matters, which is a book he's just brought out to, well, great acclaim, a lot of appreciation for it. Welcome, Sir Ed.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking to the congregation tonight and also your questions, Martin.
So this is really an opportunity for those who can't be there tonight just to hear a little bit about the book. A lot of reviews are saying, politics is personal, and that's what they love about this book, is the personal nature of it. Can you just, first of all, let our listeners know a little of your own story and why this subject is so important to you personally?
Yeah, of course, it started when I was a teenager, really. My father had died when I was 4, leaving my mother widowed in her early 30s with 3 boys under 10, 2 older brothers, and myself. And that was relatively traumatic for her, obviously. I wasn't so aware of it. I was too young. My father wrote to me, that is a letter, but I didn't really know him except through the tales and stories my mother gave. When my mother became terminally ill, when I was 12, and my brothers and I and my nan and granddad nursed her till I was 15, that was me being a young carer thrown in very much at the deep end. And as I explained in the book, that was quite a period of time, supporting her as she fought the cancer, and when she left the NHS and then went to alternative medicine, then came back on the NHS and died. So that was a sort of young carer experience. Then I was sort of looked after my brothers, my nana and granddad, and became very close to my nana, who looked after me. And then when she became elderly, I looked after her, not as a live-in carer, but visiting her frequently and dealing with my brother, her concerns of domiciliary care, meals on wheels, moving her to a care home, all that sort of thing, and moving her close to me so I could be the main family member on tap to check she was okay. And then when we had our first child, John, we didn't realise until about 6 months after he was born, but he is disabled, and although he's undiagnosed, he has a neurological problem which essentially means he is really challenged walking and talking, and he has learning disabilities as well. And so my wife and I care for our lovely John, who's now 17. So quite an experience of caring. And then I would say, as a constituency member of Parliament for a little while, I've worked with constituents who care for their loved ones. And one of the reasons I wanted to write it was not just tell my story, but to tell the stories of others. And there are 4 carers who've kindly written in the book with me, because I think care is something that affects us all, actually, some more than others. But at any one time, there's 7 million people or more looking after their loved ones. So it's an issue that needs to be talked about more.
I found all of it, but I particularly found the first chapter of the book very moving, because you talk about as you age, so you understand more as to how your parents will have felt as they were, as it were, beginning to say goodbye. Something that you only now understand as a father yourself, and having just gone through the ages, well, little time ago now, but understood from their perspective what it might have been like, where they were showing such a brave face as well.
Yeah, I mean, first for my father, he was 38 when he died. He was diagnosed in November and died in March.
Very quick.
Really quick, of a cancer that would probably be cured nowadays. And, they did faith healing, they tried everything to cure it, but it was too strong and vigorous. And he wrote my mum and my 3 brothers individual letters, and he would have been thinking about us, and it must have been very painful for him to imagine he wasn't going to be
Mm.
And I think he did the very best he could in a very short period of time. And through his letters, through what he did, setting up very modest trust. He wasn't very wealthy, but he'd hadn't done that badly for someone age 38 from a sort of mining community background. Without leaving my mother too tight, had made provision for education. I was very fortunate to have an independent education.
Mm.
And that was his sort of legacy. And he wanted to look after his boys when he wasn't going to be there.
And your mother had been a teacher, so
Yeah.
she was being helped by knowing that your brothers and you were doing well in school.
Yeah, so mum was, had a longer time when she knew she was going to leave us, and she was preparing us as well as preparing whatever she could. But by that time, yeah, we'd all had a good education. For me, and I tell this story in the book, it was when I'd been on a school trip to Germany for about 3 or 4 days, and we'd been in a coach stop. We'd gone to a car park, got out, and we started talking to these German young people, and I had my picture taken with this German girl. So we're about 13, 14. And when we had the pictures developed, old days of Kodak, not digital. And I showed the photograph of me and this young German girl to my mum. She was in bed by this time, sort of bedridden. She smiled and said, "I wonder who you'll end up." And that always stayed with me, because clearly she was thinking about me, and it hadn't occurred to me. I wasn't really thinking about marriage and things. But, she was thinking about what would my life be like when she wouldn't be there to be at my wedding.
And the chapter goes on, I think, in a really helpful way for somebody who, I was brought up by my grandparents, actually, but not through similar circumstances to your own. But it really helped me understand some of the issues faced by young people who are bereaved. And you make a very strong point about, how schools might start taking a little bit more notice of this and certain needs, and so which we can maybe touch on in a little bit. But I found that chapter really helpful to understand some of the chaotic emotions and fears and angers that can pass through you when you go through bereavement at such a young age.
Yeah, I think it's very different from an adult. So the people who grieve the most were my nan and granddad, my mum's parents, seeing their only child die front right, and they knew what was happening. I wasn't, so I had a different experience, the experience of losing this person who I loved the most, but it was my life. I was sort of experienced as a young person. Young people do take things in their stride. It's actually when my granddad died 3 years later that I actually got quite angry. Because I was thinking about my nana who'd lost her only child and her husband. And for me, now, looking back at young people's experiences, the young carer experience, a lot in the book about other young carers and how we need to think about them and what they lose, as well as children who are bereaved. And then touch on it very briefly about all children who have what are called adverse childhood experiences. There's a terminology like there is for everything. ACE, adverse childhood experiences. And bereavement and being a young carer is only a subset of that. I mean, there's obviously much more extreme poor experiences with child abuse and so on. But my contention, and it's not exactly rocket science, is it, is that if we looked after those children a bit better than we do, maybe we'd have a happier society, maybe we'd have a more prosperous society, and maybe the best education policy around is to make sure that those children having a bit of a tough time get a little bit more pastoral care or other understanding so that they can prosper.
Because of the circumstances I went in, I feel similarly campaigning for kinship carers, as they're now called, and
100%,
often
100%.
feel that they're ignored because people who are coming up to the autumn of their lives all of a sudden have to begin it again and start with looking after young children. I feel quite strongly that they need more support and recognition.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, my lovely nan and granddad, and then my nana was my kinship carer for a period of when I was a sort of younger adult. And I don't know what would have happened without her stability behind me. As a constituency MP, I've seen a number of people in their autumn years stepping up for a variety of reasons. And I do think, not always, but sometimes feeling like I'm trying to do the best. Give me a break. You know? All the bureaucracy can recognise that I have a kinship tie and it's important. My colleague Munira Wilson, who's the MP of Twickenham, has done a lot of campaign on kinship care. Obviously, we want it cross-party, but we have focused on it because it's one of those relationships which is a bit undervalued.
Yeah.
And sounds like you and my experience have some similarities that you know, my nana and granddad were very special. I have a chapter just on my nana. So
Yes, yes, I know. So thank you for sharing about why this is personal and all that. So what are you arguing in the book? What is the thrust of this argument that you want to get out there?
The call is really quite simple. And that is, we need to make sure family carers, people looking after loved ones that may not be blood related, but part of their family, maybe even a neighbour, those family carers are more visible and indeed more central to how we think about a lot of things, particularly care and social care, but absolutely health. And I would then go on to other about society, whether it's education, as we talked about before, or even the economy. And that might sound like a grandiose thing, but my contention is this, that you know, this is like normal life for millions of people. And if we're not supporting those people who are working hard to do the best thing by the people they love, and just exclude them from the debate, as they so often are, then we're going to get everything else wrong. And if you're thinking about social care, if you think about the NHS, other aspects of policy, if you don't begin with where people's real lives are, you're going to make a mistake. And I'd go so far as to say you could do great things on social care, great things on the NHS, and get it wrong because you haven't involved family carers. And I want to just, if I may, just spend a little bit about family carers in the sense that Whitehall and Westminster and policy geeks like me have often used the phrase unpaid carers.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of technical term. It's an awful.
It is.
Because not only do people sometimes not even call themselves carers, the idea that unpaid carers is who they are, they don't identify with that at all.
Yeah.
And the more I have talked to people about this issue, the more I realise that you've got to use the terms that they will understand and relate to, otherwise they won't realise you're talking about. And so unpaid is like, get that out the window. I'm afraid it's family carers. That can be seen in that broader context of what a family. And if you don't have the word family with carers, people will not realise they're carers. So one of the challenges that I talk about, and it comes from great charities and campaign groups like Carers Trust and Carers UK and many others, there's the number one problem is people identifying as a carer in the first place. And it's even more pronounced for young carers. So if we used phrases like unpaid carers, it's just no one's going to realise that we're talking about them. And so I use the phrase family carers and people looking after loved ones. Because people say, I'm looking after my wife, I'm not a carer. I'm looking after my son, I'm not a carer. Everyone does it. Well, why do you mean I'm not special? And I'm not trying to say family carers are special in a way. I'm not actually, it's this bizarre thing. I'm just saying if we forget their experiences and don't build them in, don't hear their voices and the voices they're looking for, we're just not dealing with human beings and the reality of life, and we'll get policy utterly wrong.
And of course, in a society where everything is valued by money, to say something is unpaid suggests it's not valuable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go over the top on this, but when male economists set up the system of national accounts and what was going to be counted in gross domestic product and all that sort of thing. I speak as an economist, male economist. Guess what? They left out all the stuff that was unpaid.
Yeah.
Often mostly done by women.
Yeah.
But not exclusive. And so unpaid care doesn't have a value. And you're absolutely right. If we call it unpaid, then well, it doesn't matter then.
Yeah.
And it matters more than paid care, is my...
Yeah.
And I referred in the book, right at the end, to my favourite book on care, is written by a lady called Madeline Bunting, Labels of Love. And she quotes a book by Marcel Mauss, an anthropologist, who looks at different societies in the past and who didn't necessarily have money. And his essay, apparently famous, I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know where it stands, but it's called The Gift.
Mm-hmm.
And the gift economy, where, you give something, you have to learn to reciprocate it, and then you have to learn to give it back. And that was a medium of exchange in many, I'm not going to say primitive societies, because they're not primitive, they're different societies. And maybe we've missed the gift economy alongside the market economy.
Yeah.
So maybe if we brought the two together a little bit more, we'd have a richer economy. And essentially that's what I believe.
And at the moment, my goodness me, we've got a language of politics very much based around crisis and the urgent, all those words that have got red light strapped to them. And here is a book arguing that the language of politics shifts somewhat away from crisis to taking a word like care seriously, not just some aspirational romance, but actually the heartland of what politics should be about. How hard is that to argue at the moment and be heard?
It's quite difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, politics has gone in a bad way around our world and our country, and it is a bit scary. And the divisiveness of it, and the shoutiness of it, and the sort of short-term distraction-based type of politics is deeply worrying, and it means that what I would call the real issues are not dealt with in a way which is both rational and evidence-based with good analysis, but also brings in the emotional side, which I think is crucial. And I think people who want to change things can't allow what I would, I hope you don't mind, the hard right or even the hard left to have the monopoly on emotion. I think those who want to change things need to get emotion into our politics too. And to get heard, we've just got to be determined and to repeat. And the book actually wasn't my idea. It came from HarperCollins, who had heard what I talked about in the general election and seen the party election broadcast we put out, where I talked about care and my experience and my son. And they said, would you want to write a book about it? And initially I wasn't quite sure. And then we thought, well, we've got to keep talking about care. We can got to say things over and over again, repeat ourselves the whole time, because we're not getting heard.
Yeah.
And the other people are getting heard.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history of care in British politics in the last 3 decades or more, the can gets kicked down the road. So since 1997, we have had 25 commissions, reviews, select committee inquiries and so on, all talking about social care, some of them really well, bringing in family care as well. And yet we've not done anything. We legislated twice for it and then not followed through on the legislation. So our political system knows this is an issue, absolutely knows it, cross-party, we know we have to sort this. And then we just don't get it done. And unless people like me say, right, had enough of this, we've got to get it done. Do it the right way, yes. I mean, there have been occasions where I've opposed people doing it because I think they're doing it the wrong way. And I've got some time for actually, but the way that Theresa May proposed to do it in 2017 Conservative Manifesto was the wrong way. I can go into detail if you like, talk about it in the book. But we've got to get it done. And as long as we bring the right values to the solution, I think we could end up with something quite radical and reforming our society.
It's this testosterone poisoning that's in politics at the moment across Europe now and also over the sea in the States. It makes that word care really difficult to resonate in some quarters, I think it seems to me. And I think this is a really good launch of tackling that. And it disappointed me, of course, to read in here that when your mum was really not well, that one of the disappointments for you was the church. And
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
the church didn't come and help, and she was a member of the church.
Yeah, well, we'd all sung at St. John's, Carrington.
Yes.
I've been a chorister. I was head chorister. I
Right.
loved doing
I can see you in your rough.
Yeah. I used to love it. And we had a lovely family in the church. There were some good people. But for whatever reason, when Mum became ill, we didn't feel that support.
No.
And we got more support from our neighbours in the street. You know, Bob and Margaret Fraser would make up these lovely soups, and the amazing Malhotra family, who were Hindus across the road. Wonderful real curries, better than any curry you can get in its place.
South London.
And the Doughty family, who were just friends of the family, who lived just 300 metres away, and Dilys Doughty made the most amazing lasagnas. I mean, I can remember, guess what? I was a kid. I remember the food, right?
Yeah.
Funny that.
Yeah.
But it was but the church, I regret to say, wasn't there. And I think for one of my brothers, he's not been able to go back. I have, mainly thanks to my wife, who reads the Bible every night in bed, so I don't know much choice.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I have explored my faith as much as maybe I could and would like to, but it's there, despite. And I think my mother would want me to have it, although it's always very individual.
Well, we're thrilled you're here tonight, and it in no way makes up for any omission. We're just very pleased that we can help you get this message across.
Thank you.
Tonight, because it's so important. And lots of people will be listening, maybe thinking, he's right. This is, there's so much that's wrong. It's got to be tackled, corrected. People need more support, recognition, and so on. What can the person listening to a podcast, the average person, what would you ask of them at this point, this juncture? What can the ordinary person do to?
Yeah, I mean, outside politics, you can still do lots of things, right, in your own community.
Yeah.
And if you're a carer yourself, give yourself a break. Realise that you're doing something quite wonderful, and realise that there are people out there who want to help you. So most communities will have, volunteer organisations, charities who help carers. So I talk about Kingston Carers Network. I'm the MP for Kingston Surbiton. The Kingston Carers Network is one of these amazing local charities. There'll be those in Southwark and Shore. And they help carers of all shapes and sizes, and give them that extra bit of help. So one example, to be clear, is they help dementia carers, people looking after, often it's their partner, but not always, who has dementia. And the thing they did was they set up some WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
Because being a dementia carer can be very isolating.
Yeah.
And they could talk to each other and advise each other and say, you could do this, and here's how to do this form, and then let's go for a drink. And they had a social, both online and physically, where they could find some support from people who got and understood. Now, how simple is that? Really cheap. And that was a local voluntary organisation who did that. So what can you do if you're a carer? Reach out. There will be people out there who get you. I know you'll be really busy and under pressure, but there is help there, and feel empowered and willing and able to go and ask for that help. I think if you're not a carer, you might have been, or you may not realise it, but you might well be a carer in the future. So think about this. realise it's important. And if you're in a social services role, or if you're in the health service, please think a bit about how you're doing your work. Thank you for what you do, but look at the patients a bit differently. And maybe if we take a different approach, your job will be easier, more satisfying. Because if you speak to the family carer, yes, you've got to respect the autonomy of the patient, but maybe they want you to. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll be able to mean people don't go into hospital so often. Maybe you'll be able to get someone out of hospital more quickly, because that's definitely the case. And maybe the discharge hospital will be more successful. Maybe the person won't end up in a care home for as long. There's lots of huge benefits if we just think about caring in our own community, even before we get to a point where central government and parliament actually gets its act together and not just legislates it for it, but actually delivers on it, which is what we need. And people say, well, it's going to cost money. Well, it will cost money. Let's not pretend otherwise. And I don't pretend in the book that it won't cost some money. I think it's going to be a lot less than people think, because the benefits to the health service and the wider society are so great, so enormous. But getting the Treasury to recognise that is the challenge of people like me. And the model I have actually it's there. We legislated for it in the 2014 Care Act, based on Andrew Dilnart, who's one of his great thinkers of our country. We're lucky to have it. And his commission, I think it reported in 2011, 2012, that sort of time. It's worth a read again, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's there.
Well, the vision of this cathedral is, I quote, making space for love with heart, mind and soul.
Lovely.
We felt that the whole concept of making space for the heart is something which we're going to have to take seriously over the coming years. And I just want to thank you for being here, for speaking in the cathedral, but also for keeping the heart healthy in politics, because it seems to me that if the heart is not healthy in politics, there's trouble ahead. So thank you for all that you're doing for carers, and for us to take that word much more seriously in our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much.